Good afternoon, gentlemen of the press. Let me welcome you as usual to our traditional press briefing after today's council meeting. Today, we had the 8th council meeting of the year 2024, and a number of issues were discussed. But before I go into the deliberations at the council meeting today, I want to inform you that council had a minute silence in honor of Alhaji Ahmed Mohammed Idris, a member of the Federal Executive Council 2007 to 2008 during the regime of President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua. He was Minister of State for Mines. He passed on the 25th of May, 2024, and the Federal Executive Council observed 1 minute silence in his honor. We pray all for the repose of his soul. Now, the council deliberated on the state of affairs in our nation, especially the issue of our food supply and shortage of food on the table of many Nigerians. And after exhaustive deliberation, the Minister of Agric had earlier been directed to ensure that food is being made available to Nigerians, and the understanding is that about 20 trucks of rice has already been supplied to each of the states of the Federation, including the Federal Capital Territory. Each of the trucks, of course, is carrying about 1,200 bags of 25 kg rice. This is part of the measures that government is taking, in addition to so many other ones, to ensure that the hardship being experienced by Nigerians is drastically being ameliorated. So for recap, each of the state governors has received 20 trucks of rice for onward distribution to the most vulnerable. This is a first step, and government will continue, the federal government will continue to support all the state governors, the local government, all the subnationals, so that the hardship being experienced by most Nigerians in terms of shortage of food supply is bridged. It is expected that the state governors will go ahead to distribute these food items to the most vulnerable, so that the hardship, like I said, being experienced will be brought down significantly. There is also a discussion on the CNG that the federal government has promised Nigerians. The Federal Executive Council has directed the committee on CNG to expedite its activities to supply buses, to also make it possible for the conversion kits to be available to most Nigerians. Already they have started, but the Federal Executive Council directed that they should double their effort so that the conversion kits that we need for the CNG to operate will be made available. Also, the conversion centers that had earlier been approved will also be significantly be upgraded, so that Nigerians will have more conversion centers, more conversion kits. The compliance level of CNG the federal government has directed need to go up, so as to reduce our over-reliance on PMS And this will in turn also aid our energy transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Now, you are also aware that last week the Nigerian Labour Congress met with Mr. President. This, of course, was part of the consultation that the President was doing. Recall that he had met the organized private sector. He had also met the subnationals after the committee, the tripartite committee on labor submitted its report, in order to ensure that there is a thorough analysis of the situation, so that government will come up with a minimum wage that works for all Nigerians, the federal government, the subnationals, and the organized private sector. That was also discussed today, and government has directed the Ministry of Budget to also come up with additional 2024 additional support for the 2024 budget, so that any differential or any gaps that there will exist in terms of what existed before the 2024 budget was approved, and the supplementary budget, and also what the requirement is for now. So government is working around the clock to ensure that it comes up with a minimum wage, like I said, that works for all Nigerians at the end of the day. This, of course, will be submitted to the National Assembly so that it can have legislative backing. Let me also say that the President is also open to meeting the Nigerian Labour Congress, the Trade Union Congress, and all their affiliates. We expect that meeting to hold this coming Thursday. I recall that this was already what the labor unions requested during their meeting with Mr. President last week. So the President is in agreement. He knows that the labor wants to quickly finalize this issue of minimum wage, and the government is also anxious to put the issue of minimum wage behind it. So it is expecting that the Nigerian Labour Congress, Trade Union Congress, and all their affiliates, as requested by them last week, will meet the President on Thursday, and after which the President will now transmit whatever the final agreements are, or what his views are on the tripartite committee's report to the National Assembly for legislation. Now, in all, the Federal Executive Council took note of some of the complaints amongst Nigerians, some of the issues raised in terms of transportation, in terms of food crisis, or food shortages in many homes around the country. And the Federal Executive Council is ramping up all that needs to be done to ensure that food is being put on the table of most Nigerians. So what government is doing now is just the necessary first step to ensure that supplies are made available to Nigerians through the state governors. I have told you earlier that 20 trucks of rice already has reached the state governors. All the governors have already taken delivery of that. And government will continue to work to ensure that food is made available. This, of course, is in addition to the effort that government is making in terms of fertilizer supply, which is already also being processed. Most of the governors will also have support. Recall that the Central Bank of Nigeria had earlier made available over 2.1 million bags of assorted fertilizer to the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security for onward distribution to these states. So that is also in progress. And the federal government will do everything that it can to ensure that we have more food for our people. Investments in the agricultural sector is ramped up. And you also know that the Federal Ministry of Livestock Development that was announced by Mr. President will also take off very soon. So these are some of the measures. This on from John Bosco on the of Vanguard on the minimum wage. You asked whether figures were discussed. No, I think it is the general parameters and the general principle of the minimum wage itself. And like we have said here severally, the federal government is not in opposition to wage increase. The President and the Federal Executive Council and the federal government are not in opposition to the concept of wage increase. The issue has been a wage increase that is that we can defend, meaning a wage increase that will not lead to inflation, a wage increase that not just the federal government but the subnationals and the organized private sector are able to pay, and something that is also sustainable. I recall that the President also mentioned last week that because of the fact that he is not in opposition to the issue of wage increase, he has even asked that instead of waiting for a whole 5 years before wages are reviewed, he has given, or he has muled the idea that we can actually look at these wages between 2 to 3 years, so that if there are gaps, we don't have to wait for 5 years for those gaps to be closed. So the discussion was not around the figure itself. It's about the general parameters and the general principle of the wage increase itself, which the federal government fully supports. But federal government will have to do something that not only it can carry, but the subnationals and the organized private sector will also be able to go along. Recall that I've said it here, that the issue of a new or issue of national minimum wage is not just that of the federal government. It is for the federal government, for the subnationals, and for the organized private sector. Therefore, every decision to be taken by the President will have to also take note of the sensibilities of the other parts that I talked about. So, yes, there will be wage increase because there's already a proposal before the President. There is already a report before the President. The President is deepening his consultation, and it is in that spirit that he met with the organized labor last week, and is also, as they requested, he will also meet with them on Thursday this week to finalize their thoughts, and then he will make his informed position known to Nigerians by also sending this to the National Assembly. There's a question about, from Larry Lasisi, I think, about rice. Now, because of the urgency of the need to have food available to all Nigerians, government has already taken these very proactive steps to ensure that this rice is available, and not just available, this rice is already being transported to the various states. The state governors are already in receipt of this rice, and this is tied to the question that Ubale from DW asked, that, perhaps this appears small. Yes, it is. And government is not saying that by this supply it is solving all the food challenges or the food problems that we have around the country. This is a necessary first step, and government will continue in that direction. Government will continue to do whatever it takes to ensure that Nigerians have enough food to eat. Of course, you also know some of the interventions that the federal government has done in the agricultural sector, boosting our own capacity to produce food, not just for our domestic consumption, but also possibly for export, and government will continue to do that. We know that this will not solve the problem entirely, but this is a necessary first step that it has taken, and government will continue to do that. And you can see the speed with which the federal government has ensured that this is done. Now, what we want to say is the federal government also wants to appeal to the subnationals to ensure effective distribution of these food items so that those that are most vulnerable have access to this commodity. That is the principle behind this thinking originally. We call on the subnationals to ensure that there is effective distribution so that only those who ought to have this rice actually get them and use them. There's a question of the CNG from, I think, Adeswa, asking how long this will take. Already, if you have been following news, in the last 1 week, the CNG committee has already started rolling out its programs. They are also ramping that up. We know that this is taking a while, but you also know that some of these buses and some of these conversion kits are not just things that you get off the shelf. They take time to import or take time to put together. Procurement processes are there because whatever we do have to be in conformity with what our procurement laws lay down. Therefore, government will follow every process to ensure that this promise made by Mr. President is not just being fulfilled, but is also ramped up. And the federal government will deepen that. Of course, that is the direction that the world is going. CNG is not only cheaper, it is also cleaner and less harmful to the environment. And I've mentioned here a couple of times some of the approvals that the federal government has given, the Federal Executive Council has given for the supply of buses and cars for federal government's departments and agencies. All of them will have to be CNG compliant. It is all in the spirit of ensuring that we have a smooth transition, like is the practice the world over. So yes, it may have taken a little longer, but these are necessary first steps. I will assure you that in no time, CNG will become a lot more entrenched in our, not just government offices, but all private organizations. And I know that the CNG, the Committee on CNG is putting a lot of emphasis on public transport. The conversion kits will be made available first to the public transport operators, because they are the people that move people to and from work, they move farmers, move everybody around. So they need this first, and government is paying a lot of attention to that. The whole idea is to crash the cost of transportation in this country, and government is determined to do that in no time. I think that I've answered most of the questions. To recap, yes. Yes. You know, there has been talk about, some people are saying there's a multiple budget and all that. It is not the case. And that is why the Minister of Budget has been asked to submit this additional information to the National Assembly to make it take an informed position on most of these aspects. I want to, before, this wasn't discussed at FEC, but I also need to put out there that you are aware that Nigeria has been discussing with the United Arab Emirates on the issue of the visa issue for Nigerian passport holders going to going to the United Arab Emirates. Today, an agreement has been reached on that, and effective from today, 15th of July, Nigerian passport holders are able to obtain visas to go to the United Arab Emirates. Details of that will, of course, be provided to you later today when we put out a press statement on that. But I can tell you that that agreement has been reached, and effective from today, those intending to travel to the Nigerian passport holders intending to travel to the United Arab Emirates are able to do so. Thank you very much.